of you know na Diane Teeman, may naniada na Wadatika nawa. Good afternoon. My name is Diane Teeman. I am a Wadatika band member, and I am formally a member of the Burns Paiute tribe, as they are now federally recognized. A founding member because we weren't recognized until 1973, and so I was already in grade school at the time that we got federal recognition. But I'm going to talk about our history and a little bit about our culture. And I'm very thankful to be here and that you all chose to spend this day with us to talk about this. I love talking about our culture and history, and many times I won't shut up about it, so people have to try and get me to change the topic. And so, as Jim said, I've been a representative of our tribal council, tribal government, and then I was also the Culture and Heritage Department Director for 12 years. And so I spent a lot of the my recent history speaking on behalf of the tribe. And I want to make sure today that everyone knows that I'm not speaking on behalf of my tribe. This is Diane speaking about my history, my positionality within in our community. So I'm no longer currently official representative of any type. This is about my family and our relationship to everything. And to begin with the introduction, my grandma is the little girl right there with the bread on. This is my great-great-grandfather. And aunt right there, and my uncle is right there, great uncle is right there. So this is a picture of our Burns Paiute community before we were Burns Paiute. When we returned to the Harney Basin, and I'll talk about what that means too in a little bit. There were 12 extended families. There's a little bit of like reverb here or something. I don't know if it's bothering you guys at all. If I can work through it if it is, but that's great right there, I think. But this is a picture that was taken in the 1920s of our community, and Father Huell is prominently in the center. They considered him a rogue Catholic priest, and he ended up being excommunicated from the church because of the degree of help he was offering our people. He did a lot for us, and we owe a debt of gratitude to him, so I wanted to throw that out as well. And I want to start with positioning of what reality is for us and how we learn knowledge. And this is what we call our manipunin. And if you were to ask anyone who's a fluent speaker, what is manipunin? They says, well, it's the way that it is, you know. But I did speak with others like, can you unpack that for me? And it is like our unwritten laws. It's our history, it's our philosophy, you know, all of those E's, the ologies that you might have at the university, all wrapped into one package. Much like in Western culture, back when Greek, you know, the Greeks were the prominent culture that Western culture, you know, derived from. We didn't have anthropology and philosophy and, you know, science all in these different disciplines. They were all packaged into one, and that's the way our manipunin still is. And so when someone talks about our unwritten laws, that it's equatable to our manipunin. And within our manipunin, everything is about energy. And so this is a place where Western science and our way of knowing have come to terms with one another, because energy never dies, and that's the way that we see things as well. Everything that we touch while we were alive, we leave some of our what we call puha on, and that's our energy, our power. And we have puha that we're born with. We can gift puha. We can receive it from other things. Things like eagle feathers, for instance, have a lot of puha in them. And so when you are gifted one of those, either by the eagle or someone else, then you're achieving more energy, more protection, more power. Not power in the sense of like being diminutive over someone else, but to have, you know, wellness, actually. So everything is about energy and the transference of energy, and it's not just people, it's animals and plants and minerals. Everything has puha in it. And so in our traditional culture, we practice egalitarianism where everyone and everything is equal. And there is in our language no differentiation between he, she, and it. It's all one word that you use to describe. So in English, it gets translated to it's an it or a he or a she. But when we're talking in our language, a rock is given the same deference as a human, as a plant. And so this egalitarian relationship in the ecosystem means that you're not above anyone else or below anyone else. And when I talk about anyone, I'm also talking about the plants and the animals and whatnot. So this is how we interact with the universe. If you are practicing good traditional Paiute ways, you are going to be cognizant of the way that you're interacting with everything else. And you don't take more than you give. And so when we go out, even root digging or anything like that, we make sure that we leave gifts, we leave prayers for whatever it is we're taking, and it's an exchange. So that's just a little bit about our Manipanin. We have practices from the moment you get up in the morning until the moment you go to bed each day, and then also when we're interacting with each other. And so today, I consider what I share with you, this is my gift to you. And I hope that you find some value in it because it's important for people to know about the people that, were living here and the way that they were interacting with everything. So from the archaeological perspective, there's evidence, and just east of Burns, there's evidence of there being people here at least 15,000 years. And that number is moving back further and further through time. At the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologists said that people had only been in the Americas around 500 years. And so we've gone from 500 to 15,000 over the course of the time since then. And even during my own career in archaeology, that's been moved back several thousand years. Our people know that we've been here since time immemorial, and we have oral histories of the Cascades being formed at a time when there was no land, there was only ice and water. And I'm actually working with some physical scientists and archaeologists to bring together our oral histories with Western science to try and talk about the value of our long, deep oral history knowledge about things. So to situate the Wadatika and where we are, we're one band of a giant nation of people. Great Basin people, Northern Paiutes go all the way down to Las Vegas. And we acknowledge that we are all part of one big family, but we have different bands, and the bands are usually situated by sub-basin. So much is about water. The picture on the left is what the Great Basin looks like hydrologically. All of the areas where water drains into the basin and not out to the ocean. Culturally, Great Basin is larger. So along the peripheries of the hydrologic Great Basin, we have Paiute and Shoshone people. So our Wadatika area goes over, just 30 miles east of where our current reservation is. The water drains into the Malheur, into the Snake, into the Columbia, into the ocean. So we, did have a long history of relationship with salmon and whatnot as well. And then before I say too much more, I'm going to have a number of maps. And I want to say that this is not any kind of a land claim or assertion. Before everything started being mapped. Our people were very fluid. Other tribes, we interacted, we gambled a lot. There was stealing of ladies back and forth all over the place. And so these ideas that there's a hard line is really fairly recent. And I tried to throw in a few different maps with varying lines on them so that you could see that there is variation. What is important here, the map on the right is an ethnographic map that was done back in the 1930s and 40s by Omer Stewart. And he was mapping the different bands of northern Paiute people and where their customary primary lands were. And so the Wadatika are centered in the Malheur Basin, but they had a wide range, and then they overlapped with other bands. And the deer eaters were actually right here at Sisters, centered at Sisters, which is one of our bands. But this is like before contact, where folks would have called home. And it gets a little more complicated, which I will talk about a little bit when I move on to the slides in the advance. But another example on the other picture here is how the languages have been discussed by some of the folks that are working today in languages and whatnot. And this as well, this is another language map that shows the variation of all of the languages within the state. And then finally, this is an official map from the Burns Paiute tribe. Since I am a member, I figured I'd throw it in. And so our tribe didn't want to create a map for a very long time, just because maps have been used against us at times. And it was when we became a Tribal Historic Preservation Office, we were required to create a map. And so this map was done collaboratively with our membership and our advisory boards, and then approved by our tribal council officially. And so what this map establishes for our tribe is that anything that happens within this area, we have a responsibility to make sure it's being appropriately taken care of. It's not any kind of like, this is our land and not yours, or anything like that, because we're all aware that it overlaps with many other, tribal communities. But because of our blood ties, this is the area we feel primarily responsible for. And so when I was the culture director, this was the area that I was responsible for tracking all of the projects that were happening there. So I talked a little bit about the bands, but I'm going to take a drink real quick here. And I talked about membership, so me being a Wadatika, but my family ties back 2 or 3 generations, I am related to many of those other bands on the map. So traditionally we practiced band exogamy, which means you would marry outside of your band. And when you would introduce yourself, I introduced myself, but I didn't talk about who my parents were and what bands they belonged to, or my grandparents and what bands they belonged to. But if I had done that, which I would do if I was in a tribal community today, then people would know, oh, 2 generations back, you are Wadatika, groundhog eater, or my grandfather was Tagu. He was from the Waihi area. And so this is the way that we would establish when we moved into other areas, which everyone traveled a lot, that, okay, you may not be from this space and I may have never seen you before, but when you're talking about who your parents and grandparents are, I remember your great-grandpa used to come over here and, he was my grandpa's cousin or whatever it might be. So this helps us across that broad area of the Great Basin be able to show we have blood ties and that we have not so much rights, but we should be welcomed by the people that are living in that area because we have a lineage there. And that's how things worked for millennia. And that also would help ecologically, because if there was some kind of local disaster that happened, a fire, or, maybe there was a drought, you could call upon and move over to one of your extended family band areas, and they would welcome you in. The other part of it is with marriage, it's brittle. And so that's an anthropological term, which means like there's no big fuss if you decide you don't want to be married anymore. You just go your separate ways. And so no going to court or anything like that. Adoption was also very common. And so within the extended family, we don't have a nuclear family, we have extended family. And so your first cousins are considered your brothers and sisters. And then, further out, they're all your cousins forever and ever. And so all of your relatives are always important and can be called upon. But sometimes either a family might lose a child, or they can have children, and there might be another family that has too many. Adoption wasn't looked at as like, I'm failing as a parent because I'm giving you this child. And so it was a pretty fluid way of making sure that everyone got taken care of. And many, many customs around childbirth. Death is probably the area that in my opinion, that we have held on to more of our traditional customs than in any other area. And I think that's because it's so important in that big Manipunin understanding that we take care of people in the afterlife once they, leave their physical body. And they still are attached to their physical body, but their soul is eternal. And so we need to make sure that we continue to take care of them. And I see that, happening in discussions all the time when we're talking about ancestors, and making sure ancestors get repatriated and reinterred. The other thing I'll share about, our Manipunin as it relates to family and relatives. So a family is super important because the Great Basin can be very hostile at times, and so we have these extensions of who we can reach out to for help in the family. But every family member has special authorities and responsibilities, and so if it's your older brother or your younger brother or your maternal grandmother or your paternal grandmother, it all is a difference in what rights and responsibilities you have. So like my two grandsons that are here today, they're my moatsi. I am their maternal grandmother. And so, and it's coming right back, I am their moa. I can call them moa or moatsi. Moatsi is just like little, so it's like a cute ending piece to it. But my other, I have two. I have two others. One is my moatsi, and one is my hutsi. And my hutsi is my son's child. And so I have a different relationship with my hutsi than I do with my moa or my moatsi. And older brothers and younger brothers also have different rights and responsibilities. So Pabi, the older brother, and Wangat, the younger brother, they have their own rules to play as well. And this also comes into play in regards to marriage, because when you marry someone in our tradition, the brothers are responsible for that wife. And so if anything should happen to the husband, the brothers need to take care of that family. And that anthropologists call it levirate. And in our community, I think my grandma, the little girl that I showed you in the picture, was the last one that practiced levirate. So she was married in succession to 3 brothers. And so she has children from 2 of those brothers over a period of time. And that was very common, as was polygamy, and sometimes polygyny, but not as often. So having multiple wives, sometimes having multiple husbands. I feel like I'm doing a whole lot of talking, and I'm kind of used to being interactive. So, if anyone has a burning question, we'll take questions afterwards. But if anyone has a question on this now, feel free to let me know too. So I will leave that. particular topic for a little bit, and that's a little bit about our a big overview of our culture. If I had to put it all into a nutshell, I would say, energy. Everything is about energy and how we protect our energy and how we protect the energy of our family, and that's through doing good things, doing good deeds, being a hard worker, all of those types of things. So the first contact that we have with outsiders that's documented in our oral history happened, I think it was actually, I'm going to forget the name of that wagon party that got lost. Can anyone help me? Meeks. Yeah, Donner did too, and that happened with some Paiutes down by Reno. But yeah, Meeks party. So, in the mid 1800s, somewhere in there, oral history talks about this snake of dust coming, and the people were following it alongside, watching it because they'd never seen anything like it. And one of the young girls wrote a song about it because it was so magnificent and like unfamiliar that it needed to be recorded. So there is a song that we don't have audio for, but we have the words in both Paiute and English that talks about that and about this, this big like slithering dust, coming up across the basin. And when they got to where we believe is about the end of Mud Lake, they met up together. Everyone, I guess, decided that they were, going to be brave enough to meet up with each one another, and they had an exchange. And in that exchange, that's where our people first got kopi, which is coffee. And so that was also memorable because coffee is a big thing. I was just talking with our elders group yesterday, and they were talking about kids don't drink coffee anymore. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Because it used to be a thing. You get offered coffee like really young. And anyway, so that's our first, oral history, story of yes.
Where relative to Mud Lake were you describing?
On the west side, somewhere around the west side of Mud Lake. Yeah.
By the barrier dune.
Probably a little bit further beyond that, over maybe closer to Iron Mountain. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so there are also stories that come from, externally about, first contacts. And I do know further to the west on the Malheur and over by the Snake, there were some interactions in the 1840s or so. Before that, even though Peter Skene Ogden came in 1826, I want to say, and he recorded coming to the Malheur Lake. And he said that there were so many people there, you couldn't walk more than, a couple yards without touching houses. We call them novi, and they're called wiki up, I think by anthropologists, but they were very tightly packed all around the lake, thousands of people, so many people, we must surely be the largest nation in all of the Americas. And so this is important because archaeologists and anthropologists have tried to say how few people there were in the Great Basin. We know that we had a big population. And so Peter Skene Ogden actually was able to help with that, to document that before the plagues and before everything else happened, that there were many, many people here in the Great Basin. So we have oral history after Peter Skene Ogden came of, what the oral history says is that there was a bad medicine man, that he became bad. So he had sent his son off to go collect things, and his son didn't come back. And he found his son hanging from a juniper tree, and his son had reached into the hole and been bitten by a rattlesnake and had died there. And the medicine man blamed the people for that. This energy that I'm talking about, the puha, it can be very good, but there can also be dark or negative puha. So he felt someone had done that intentionally to him for whatever reason, and he put a curse on the people. And that year, that winter, many, many people died. And the rumors started, going along about, who was causing this, what was happening. And then he came out and said he had done it. And then he said it was going to happen again, and it did. And so he ended up being killed in a very gruesome way to try and destroy his puha, which puha is very hard to destroy. Energy lives forever. But they did many things to him to try and stop it. But in anthropological terms, that's been credited to plagues, different types of diseases that might have happened that caused that many people to die that quickly. But in our oral history, there's a different understanding of it. So by the time that the first settlers were beginning to come into the area, we had already had quite a few people, die from disease. They didn't have direct contact necessarily, but secondary contact. So the east, from the east side of the Cascades, was still Indian country for a very long time. And at this time, there were attempts to try and get land cession treaties completed. And so I know Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs had a land cession treaty where they relinquished the right to the land for certain things, in exchange. And those were pretty common treaties at that time. There was an attempt to try and create a treaty with our people, all of the Northern Paiute people. They were not willing. They were still trying to avoid. That's one of the things we do when there's something that we don't want. We will avoid it. People will physically today, like if you go into a meeting and they're upset about something, they will just turn their back on you, like, you don't exist. And so this avoidance thing doesn't work well, though, when you are like working with things like treaties and people wanting to take your land. But so people were, avoiding, hiding, moving away from during all this time. And it wasn't until 1859 when the state of Oregon was established that we were really bothered with a whole lot. There were, small attempts here and there, incursions of fair weather militia that tried to come in. They would come in the spring and they would leave in the fall. But after the state of Oregon was established, there was a much greater effort to try and relocate us. And our people refused. There was a treaty that came later, but I'm going to keep this here for a minute. So this is the one and only picture of Chief Paulina that I'm aware of. And for some people, he was very scary and, a bad person. To me, because of what he was trying to do to protect our people, he's one of my heroes, and it's a matter of, I guess, your positionality in all of this history. But I understand him as someone that was trying to protect his way of life. And, for others that he had issue with or his war party was fighting with, they would talk differently about him. But about this time, too, Chief Paulina was trying to scare people out, right? People are trying to come in, and he's trying to scare them away. And then about this time, too, still land cession treaty era, the Klamath tribes signed their treaty, and that is with one of the bands of Paiute, with the Yahuskin band of Paiute. So there was some of our Paiute land that was cessioned by that treaty as well. And so we're still trying to avoid, still trying to live traditional way of life, and the Civil War ends, and that's when there's more effort because there's more military availability. And I should ask, I don't have a clock up here, how much time I have about. Okay. Thank you. So enter General George Crook, and he was well seasoned with, all of the battles that he had during the Civil War. And he just seems to be a very no-nonsense person from everything I've read about him and that he has written. So he came into Fort Boise. He had some scouts, and he tried to come up the Malheur initially. There's a place called Jonesboro Ranch that my tribe currently owns, which I believe is actually where that first skirmish happened. And we pushed him back. And then he, did some more strategic planning and made another run at it and did what, nobody will deny is an extermination campaign. So no prisoners were to be taken. And he had scouts that would come in and help find our people. And then they would come in just before light and try and kill everybody. And that was happening all over everywhere for 2 years. Despite his rule about not taking prisoners, he did take one small boy. And this boy was in the picture when I first did introduction as an old man. He is known today as Chief Captain Louis. But when he was captured, everyone else was killed in his camp but him. And General Crook took him and raised him. And in the early census records, he's actually called Louis Crook. So he had the last name Crook in around the 1900s. And this is Chief Captain Louis here as an elder. So he did witness a lot of that time, that era, and talked about it later, and we also have oral history of it. And then on the other side, that's some of the scouts that had, probably revenge on their mind because Paiutes, and especially Chief Paulina, because they were trying to scare everyone out, they were very brutal. And, you're not going to have friends as a result of that. So, there were people that had revenge on their mind. And so there was the ability to, to recruit scouts. But that's how Crook used what he had at hand to be able to try and accomplish accomplish his end goal. So in 1868, he had our people up against the wall, so to speak, at a place we call Tiquahone. And a truce was derived from it, and they came into Fort Harney, and a treaty was signed. And that's where, I believe, Wilson Weewa, who is a relative, he's been here before, that's where his ancestor and other leadership, including my great-great-grandfather, signed a treaty. But the difference was these were not treaties of land cession. It was a treaty of peace and friendship. So what it said is we're going to stop fighting. And General Crook said, you can either sign this treaty or we'll keep fighting until, your smallest child is fighting us and they're gone. And so our leadership said this was the thing to do, and that's what they did. So in our treaty, and it's called Treaty with the Shoshone, if anyone Googles it, 1868, Fort Harney, it says that everyone will stop fighting and that a reservation will be created later. And later, through a series of executive orders, our 1.8 million acre Malheur Reservation was created. And there were about 1,000 people there at one point. And it was for all of the Indian people that were still, I can't remember the exact terminology, but free and roaming. So it wasn't just the Wadatika, whose area that primarily was, but for all of the people that were not on another reservation already, that wanted to come in. So mostly Paiute, Shoshone, Bannock, but other folks may have been married in as well. Chief Egan was actually Cayuse. He was either stolen or adopted, we don't know, when he was a little baby from the Snake River, and then raised as Paiute. So one of our most prominent chiefs was actually by blood, Cayuse. So this is a picture of where the reservation headquarters was, and there are still some remains there. In 2019, we did a archaeological field school there, where we taught, it was native taught, all native students, to try and do archaeology in a way that isn't that is acceptable to our elders. And so it took quite a bit of discussion, but we were able to pull it off, I think, successfully, so much to the point where we have elders that are asking for us to do another field school there. But this is where the headquarters was, and like I said, there were about 1,000 people there at one point, and there were 8 buildings. And everything was pretty good in the beginning, even though our Manipanin says we're not supposed to do a lot of deep digging. And when we do dig, there are rules around it. They were able to convince our men to dig canals and to clear fields for farming. And they had a lot of success with their crops. And Samuel Parrish, who was the commissary guy, he was really well liked by everyone. And then for a time, he was leadership. And things were going too well, though, and that's a lot of prime farmland. And so the people of the area didn't want the reservation to continue to be there. And Reinhardt could be bought out. And he was very mean, too. Our oral history talks about him pulling the ear off a little boy because he thought the little boy was laughing at him. And a very stern person. And so strife began at the reservation. Also, Sarah Winnemucca, she has a very strange, I guess, positionality in all of our history. People love her or hate her among our Paiute people. I think she's very misunderstood. But she was an interpreter for the military at that time. She hails out of Pyramid Lake. But she was up there working, and then when she would speak up for our people, her and Reinhardt quickly became harsh enemies. So he has horrible things to say about her, and she doesn't have kind things to say about him either. But at the point that over at Camas Prairie in Idaho, the Bannock War started up, and the Bannocks are related to us culturally, linguistically. They're basically Paiute people. They were coming over to ask for our help, and things were not good at the reservation there. And so everyone left the reservation. Like, I have copies of the administrative rules, and it's like, we have 26 children here this day, and then the next month, like, we have no children here. They're all gone. And that was about springtime when the spring salmon runs happened. And Sarah was asked by our tribal leadership to go back to Washington, D.C. to try and get word, that we needed help. And they gave her all the money that they had, and she had some folks that were riding with her for pay, and she was going to sell her wagon when she got to Winnemucca, but she got held up at a place called Three Rivers, and she was arrested. So that never happened. And Reinhardt has lost control of the people on the reservation because they've all left. And then the Bannock War happened. And the Bannock War was pretty swift. It only was a matter of about 4 months. And it ended up at south of Pilot Butte at Battle Mountain when Chief Egan was killed. And some of my family, female members of my family, were there and witnessed the fight and him getting killed. And Umapine, who is from Umatilla tribe, he was the one that, I guess, double-crossed is what they said happened. And he ended up taking Chief Egan's head as proof that he was killed. And that effectively ended the Bannock War. And our people were spread to the four winds at that point, hiding, trying to stay out of the way, because they'd just gone through this, gone through the extermination campaigns. The older ones didn't want to fight anymore. And they said it was just a few of the younger ones that like rose up with the Bannock and were willing to fight. But everyone ended up getting brought into it anyway. And after Chief Egan died, they were trying to figure out, what can I do? Maybe I'll go, I have relatives over here, over there, using those traditional systems to try and find a place to hide. Sarah was also instrumental at that point of telling people, come back into the fort, it'll be okay, because that's what she was being told. And so many did, and then they were held there for a couple of months, and there's lots of administrative records about, well, what do we do with them now? They rose up again and all of this, and so it was decided around Christmas time that they were going to march the survivors up to Fort Simcoe, Washington. And so on January 2nd, 1879, they marched our people 350 miles in knee-deep snow, took about a month up to Fort Simcoe, Washington, and we were exiled for half a decade up there. And this lady right here, this is my great-grandma, and she was a little girl when that happened. So she remembered before, like, all of this. She remembered, like, riding on her brother's shoulders, crossing the Snake, because there's certain places on the Snake River that you can walk across. And so she remembered, went from that, and then being up at Fort Simcoe. But when she was still pretty small, adolescent, her and another girl escaped and walked all the way back. And so they ended up, and she's actually Shoshone. She's from the Sheep Eater band from around, I forget the name of that town in Idaho. But she's not Paiute. She became Paiute, though, because when they do our Indian census rolls, anyone, as long as they look dark enough to be full-blooded, they would put them, So she was 4/4 Paiute. It didn't matter if you were, Asian or you would be 4/4 whatever. So she became 4/4 Paiute on our rolls. She survived that and, went on to have a family in the Burns area. But the rest of the folks were, I won't say released, they just took off as a large group. And there's also communications back and forth, like, do we go after them? And, and then they said, well, who's going to pay for it if we go after them? Because any of these, things take a lot of money and contractors and all those kinds of things. And they just let everyone go. So that's how the 12 extended families ended up back in Burns. And then a larger contingent of people moved to Duck Valley Reservation, of those people that were exiled. And then many went to Warm Springs, and so that's why you have a contingent of Paiute people at Warm Springs that are, they're basically us, just a slightly different history in more recent years. And many other reservations. So when we had that field school in 2019, I wanted to make sure that everyone was okay with us doing the work that we were doing at the agency, which meant that I had to try and seek invitation to many of those different reservations. And I came along the list of those reservations by looking at the 1930, there was a general council meeting that had been called at Burns, and it was about the Malheur Reservation, because when we all got exiled up to Washington, there's a series of executive orders that returned that 1.8 million acre reservation to public domain. And by the 1930s, we were ready to fight for it, And so they started organizing, and they were like, well, where are all of our people that had, gone through this and were part of that reservation? And so this call went out, and it was, all over Oregon. Some of our people stayed up at Fort Simcoe, all over Nevada, Idaho, California, looking for the descendants. And so there was this big general council that was held in I want to say it was 1933 or 34. There are actually two of them that happened. And Chief Peter Teeman, who was also in the picture that I originally showed, he was elected as chair of the convenings, and they started organizing to get a list of who was still alive or who were the descendants and how are we going to pay for attorneys and all of this and that. So that effort took, several decades, but they did finally win in the Indian Claims Commission that reservation had been illegally taken away. It's just that during the Indian Claims Commission, they would not give any land back. All they could do is provide settlement. And at the end of the day, after all the attorneys and everything, people that had entitlement to it ended up with about $770 each, which isn't much considering, that big of a land base. So back to the 12 extended families. The 12 extended families that returned to the basin, they didn't have any place to go. We were landless. And they settled near Druzy. There were big ranching communities there that were willing to take people on to provide them work. A lot of the women did like washer women work or made gloves out of buckskin. The men did a variety of things as ranch hands. We have a big contingent of native cowboys now that derives out of that interaction too. And so that's what they did. And then they were able to get allotments, which are 160-acre allotments for every head of household. And some of them received those allotments and still have them to this day. It's kind of crazy, though. They're so fractionated. You might have like 1,200 people on 160-acre allotment. And you get a check once a year for like $4 for it being leased out. But that's where the land positioning came. So and then once the town of Burns started developing, our people moved closer to Burns, and we have a place called Old Camp, which is actually a variety of places because, as I talked about early on, our puha and our rules around death. If somebody passes away somewhere, you need to abandon that immediate vicinity because you don't want to get something they call ghost sickness. So there's a lot of moving around of Old Camp until in 1928, the Egan Land Title Company donated 10 acres to us, which was the city dump. And that was our first solid piece of land again. We call that Old Camp today. We had a casino there for a while. And then during the Indian Reorganization Act, every tribe, whether they were recognized at the time or not, was allowed the opportunity to organize under IRA. And our people initially agreed to become an IRA tribe, and the money started flowing in to help them get a loan to buy some more land. And then they decided they didn't want to do it. A lot of fighting, and so we had the land, but then we had to pay the government back for it. So the place that we have New Camp, our actual headquarters now, is land that we got through a loan, and then we have a big alfalfa field there that we were able to sell, and the profits went towards paying for the land, which was in fee, until in 1968, the Solicitor General was tasked with going across the United States and finding all of the tribes that weren't currently federally recognized to determine whether they should be recognized. And Lonnie, my husband's mom, was very instrumental in that because she had some college and she spoke Paiute and she understood Paiute, and so the elders that didn't speak any English, they were able to communicate all of the important things they needed to do. She was able to get the paperwork in, and then we were able to get recognition that way. The tribe at Burns is not solely Wadatika, again, because of this very complicated history. It's Wadatika Basin, but it's all of the tribes from Eastern Oregon. If you were still hiding out and your family hadn't participated, then you would be able to go there to try and seek refuge and continue to exist. So this is New Camp, but it's a recent picture because I was like, I don't have any pictures, historic pictures of New Camp. So this is actually from the flooding last spring, and I'm like, my family is like right in the mix. Some are right over in here, but it was pretty crazy for a little bit there.
Which part of Burns is that?
We're on the north end, the Silvies, yeah. The Silvies River used to be the west boundary of the old Malheur Reservation, and then currently our reservation is, the Silvies is the northeastern boundary of it. And then I wanted to share, because there's so much information, and hopefully I presented it in a way that sort of makes sense, but there's a lot more information out there. And The Earth is Our Home is a video that was done back in the early 1970s that talks about a lot of our traditional material culture. So like this is an OV, one of our traditional houses, and she's got like a winnowing basket, and it goes into a lot more detail. I think it's even on YouTube, but it's called The Earth is Our Home if you have interest in learning more about that material culture. And then just a little bit today about home. So I talked about the 10 acres that we received, and then the loan that we received, and our recognition in 1968, and that, today we have about 439 members, so we're the smallest tribe in Oregon, but we have all these relatives, right? So, all of our relatives that were scattered during this post-contact history, and the relatives that we had prior to that everywhere. But we're working really hard to try and make sure that all of our practices continue for future generations, and why I drag my grandkids to come listen to me talk, to hope that they'll know and remember and be able to continue on a lot of this as well. And that's it. So thank you.